Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you today. I'm just going to give people a minute to join the meeting and just be aware that this session is being recorded today. Can you see my slides, Lachlan? In the right format? Yep.
Sure
Wonderful.
can. Yep.
Thank you. So we've got a few people joining us. I can see about 6 in there. 6 of you have joined us this morning. Hopefully we get a few more. Just give people a minute. Wonderful. All right, so let's get going, and others can join us sort of as they come in. So good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see many of you on the call this morning for our session on engaging with the scholarship of teaching and learning literature. I am delighted to be joined by my colleagues Lauren Hookham from the Division of Library Services. Appreciate your partnership, Lauren, in bringing this session together. And of course, our 3 guest presenters, Kim Lustig from the School of Allied Health, Exercise and Sports Science, Bismarck Ofori Mantel from the School of Dentistry and Medical Science, and Kate Smithers from the School of Education. Kate will be joining us shortly. And the reason that it's wonderful to have Kim, Bismarck, and Kate here is because they will talk about how they've engaged with the SoTL literature as disciplinary practitioners, and I think that is a wonderful reflection to hear how they've gone about it and also what they've found in that process. So I'm delighted to have you here today. I want to acknowledge firstly traditional custodians of the lands past, present and emerging on the many lands on which we teach and learn. Please feel free to acknowledge the country that you're joining from today in the chat. I'm joining from the land of the Biripi people in Port Macquarie. I recognise the continuing connection and the deep connection that our traditional custodians have with land, water and culture. I pay my respects to them and also to any of our First Nation colleagues in this meeting today. So everyone, I'll have a very short introduction to give. It's a bit of a recap of the sessions that we've had so far. This is the 2nd session in our SoTL at Charles Sturt series, which is fantastic. So I'll just do a brief introduction and then hand straight over to Lauren, who will take us through the what, the why, and the how, I guess, of engaging with the literature. And then we'll hopefully have some time for questions and then move into the reflections from Kim, Bismarck and Kate, where they reflect on how they've done this within the discipline that they are in. And then at that point, Lauren, you'll come back on and present a little bit more around kind of thinking about the evaluation perspective and quality aspects of the literature. How do we determine what's good quality? And then that will bring the session to a close, and we'll hopefully have opportunity for, sorry, I can hear some background noise somewhere. Someone might not be muted. Oh, all good. So we'll have lots of opportunity during the session for some conversation and questions. So please either put your questions on the chat or make notes as you go, so that when we have those opportunities, we can really have questions for our panel, but also Lauren, and really have that in-depth conversation. So everyone, I just wanted to, this was a slide that we used in our first session of the series, which was held in April, I think. And I just wanted to put this back up again because I really want all of us in this community at Charles Sturt to understand that scholarly activity happens on a continuum. And you can see, obviously, scholarly teaching, which is involves that reflection on the feedback that we get, the reflection, deep reflection on our teaching practices, the engagement with the literature, for example, the engagement with peers around learning and teaching. All of that we all probably do on an everyday basis. So that's where we situate scholarly teaching, because it's evidence informed. What we're talking about today is on the other side of the continuum, and that is about the scholarship of learning and teaching. Now, the scholarship of learning and teaching is different in the sense that it is systematic in its approach. It's grounded in a real world issue, problem, challenge, or opportunity. It's informed by the literature. So what's happening out there in the world. It's systematic in its approach, and it applies a robust methodology. So whether you're doing engaging with the literature, whether you're doing a qualitative or quantitative study, there's a methodology that is used and applied. And it is public facing in the sense that it is open for your peers to review, critique, and extend. And ideally, it would also be informed by theory. So I think it's important for us as a community to keep re-engaging with the definitions of what SoTL is and the characteristics of high quality SoTL. And again, I maintain that SoTL, that is characterized by these features, is research. So let's remember that SoTL is research, and SoTL that's characterized by these features is absolutely research. And so the series the series that we are having through the Teaching Academy, which is around SoTL at Charles Sturt, is really about unpacking these dimensions and understanding how they can be applied in your own project. So I did want to return to this point as well, which I made in the first session we had a month ago. And it comes to this idea that I've been talking about, which is research is a social and rhetorical act. So we talked about SoTL is research, and now research is a social and rhetorical act. Prompts us to think about how your SoTL research contributes to a scholarly conversation. So I use the analogy of conversation, or the metaphor of conversation, to help us remind that when you think about the work that you're doing, you need to be able to identify where is that conversation happening and where is it up to? What's happening in that conversation? Who is having it? What are they saying? What are they not saying potentially? Why does this conversation matter to you? Why does it matter to practitioners in your discipline? Why does it matter to us as a learning and teaching community? Does it matter to the university? Does it matter to community? Does it matter to industry? So why is this conversation important? Why does it matter? And to whom does it matter? And as part of this SoTL as conversation analogy, we also need to be thinking about, how do I want to contribute to that conversation? What do I want to say? Am I agreeing? Am I challenging it? Am I adding on to the conversation? And where and how will I join the conversation? So the paper that I referenced here, it's from a medical education perspective, but written in a very general kind of lay language. And it's only a short 2-page paper. I would recommend that you read it. And Lorelei Lingard talks about this idea that when we think about any of the research that we want to do in learning and teaching, we can take a step back to really think about the conversation that we want to contribute to. So I find that very useful as a way to frame the work that I would like to do in this space. And so I hope that you can also think about this and think about the SoTL that you are engaged in, and thinking about how it contributes and how it value adds to a current conversation. And of course, where does the conversation happen? For most of us, it happens in journals, it happens at conferences, it happens obviously in situations like this where we engage as peers, but obviously the focus today is thinking about the literature, thinking about the conversation happening within the peer-reviewed literature, which is where wonderful Lauren comes in to talk about how can we engage with the conversation that's happening in the literature. So Lauren, segue to you to take us through part 1 of the session. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can share your slides.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so hopefully those are showing for you all now. Fabulous.
Yes, Lauren, thank you.
So yes, thank you for that lovely lead in. Yeah, today in the two parts that I'm doing, we're really going to be looking at how you can search well to find the literature that's relevant to the conversation you want to be a part of. And when I come back for part two, it'll be more about keeping up to date and evaluating. So I guess, why are you searching strategically for SoTL literature? So SoTL research, it sits at the intersection of education, discipline-specific knowledge, and also a range of research methods. So that can make it a little more challenging to locate. So today we're going to be focusing on ways to make your searches both effective and efficient. So ensuring that you are capturing the best available research without spending unnecessary time sifting through irrelevant results. So very traditional literature searching skills here. So either a refresh for people or maybe learning some new strategies. But before you start searching, it is important to be clear about your purpose. So thinking about what you're doing in this SoTL space, are you mapping out the existing research to inform a new project? Are you aiming to just keep up to date with the latest developments? Are you finding a few key references to support a change in your teaching practice? Or are you actually conducting a comprehensive review that you're going to use to position your own study within the wider literature? So the purpose you have will shape not just what you search for, but how broadly you're searching and how systematically you're searching. And of course, it will inform how much time you're investing in this project. The search skills and strategies that I'll discuss and demonstrate today, these really are the building blocks of conducting strategic literature searches that are then used in literature reviews, systematic reviews, or scoping reviews. And that strategic searching all starts with your keywords. So as you're preparing to search, it is important to work out exactly what it is you're looking for before you dive into the searching. We recommend starting by identifying the 2, 3, 4 main concepts of your topic. And then for those topics, you'll then find synonyms and related phrases for those concepts as well. As part of this, remember to consider spelling variations and plurals. It might be a topic that you know rather well, so then all those keywords will be familiar to you. If it's something you're less familiar with, that's when you'd start with some simple searches in the database or in Primo to help you discover some relevant terms that you can build in to your search strategy. And it can be helpful to map out these terms in a table. So let's look at a scenario, and I'll be following this scenario through my search demonstrations as well. We'll use this to look at that sort of keyword mapping and then how we pull our keywords together. So for today, we're interested in whether active learning strategies such as group discussions, problem-solving exercises, or flipped classroom approaches, whether these strategies improve student engagement in large university classes. So at the top of the table, I have my main concepts of active learning, student engagement, and large classes. And then down the columns, I have my synonyms, keywords, related terms. And you can see in here I've included those spelling variations to make sure I'm going to cast that wide net and not miss any important information. So that's just our quick keyword brainstorm. And if there were other terms I was unsure of, I might do a quick Primo or even a Google Scholar search just to see what terms are coming up. After we've developed our list of search terms and synonyms, we then combine these terms using our Boolean search operators. So within each concept, we use the OR operator to include all the possible terms. And then we combine our different concepts with the AND operator to see the results that overlap across our concepts. So in the abbreviated example on the slide, I've also made use of phrase searching, where I've enclosed common multi-word phrases within quotation marks, and I've then used parentheses to group each concept of the search. Additionally, I've made use of the asterisk to do a truncated search, and that will allow me to see the variations of that STEM word. So here I'll get large class as well as large classes. So this is just combining our separate concepts with these strategies to cast that sort of comprehensive but precise net as we're searching. Now, if you need a refresh on your understanding of how these different operators work, take a look at the database help guide, or of course, contact your faculty librarian. That's a big part of what we do, is making sure people understand how these all work. Next, we want to think about where is the best place to search. So SoTL literature isn't always confined to traditional journals. It can appear in education-focused databases, discipline-specific journals, and also grey literature, such as your conference papers or reports and so on. So in the library or through the library, you have access to a wide range of databases. Some of these are subject or discipline specific, while others are multidisciplinary, covering that broad range of subject areas. So a few recommendations when starting out with your SoTL literature searching. I would recommend starting in the education databases, so diving into ERIC or ProQuest Education, and then try a broader multidisciplinary or citation databases. So here we're thinking Academic Search Complete or perhaps Scopus. If you are looking to get that real discipline focus to your literature, perhaps you will need to move into a specific database for your discipline as well. What I would encourage you to do is to search for grey literature as well. Today, I don't really have time to demonstrate grey literature searching. Some of that grey literature will come up in the databases. So ERIC contains conference papers and reports and such as well. But often this is web searching or going to the website for particular associations or looking up conferences to see what's out there. If you want help with your grey literature searching, again, reach out to your faculty librarian, or we have a grey literature guide and we have an on-demand PD session for finding Australian and grey literature content. As we have recommendations on databases listed in our SoTL library guide, and you can also explore our full range of databases on our A to Z list, and we'll see that in a moment. In the SoTL guide, we also include links to particular recommended journals and we group them by faculty, as most disciplines do have a dedicated teaching and learning journal. So it can be helpful to set up a table of contents alert or go do a search within that particular journal as well. All right, so with all that planning in place, it's then time to move into the actual searching, and this you'll test and refine as you go. So we are remembering at this stage that our literature search process, it is iterative rather than being strictly linear. Today, I'm going to be demonstrating with ERIC, and I will use a more comprehensive version of that example search string from the earlier slide. So ERIC, which is the Education Resources Information Centre, it holds a large collection of more than 1.5 million records, and within that it's got journal articles, books, conference papers, policy papers, reports, dissertations. It's covering quite a wide range. So let's dive in and we'll go and have a look at how we can effectively run a search. So this here is just our SoTL guide, which there are links to this in my slides later on. And now we're on the A to Z databases page, hopefully familiar to everyone. Within this page, of course, you can explore all of our current subscriptions. You can filter or browse the list by subject area, as well as sort of database type. Or if you know exactly the database you're after, you just pop the title into the search. So here we go. This is ERIC. It's on the EBSCOhost platform, lovely and friendly. And here we're going to make use of the advanced search screen, which is our stacked search rows to build and structure our search. To save me making typos, I'm just going to copy and paste things in. So give me a moment while I do that. I'll just go back to the front of these. So in an advanced search screen, we use each separate row as a separate concept of our search. Okay, so in the top one, I have that sort of active learning concept. I've included all of my phrases, enclosing them in quotation marks. I've used the or operator between them because it's within the concept. I want to capture all of these options. between my rows, I'm using the and to make sure that I'm only seeing results that contain the 3 concepts. Okay, so in this third concept, I'm using that truncation to get class or classes. Later, I also use it for lecture and lectures. And for the spelling variations, I've included the phrase with enrolment with 1 L and 2 Ls, just to make sure I'm not missing out on any content. Okay, so a fairly focused set of results there. If we just take a look through, of course, the highlighting or the bold is showing us where our search terms are appearing. So it's really helpful, or it's good to see, encouraging to see that our terms are showing up within the subject headings of these items as well. At this stage, I could keep an eye out to see if there are any other terms I need to build into my search strategy. And I can also make use of the filters down the left-hand side to refine my search further. So here we have a set of our common filters of publication date, resource type, subject. So these are those subject headings again, publication title, language, and geography. And so that geography is usually about the geography of the publication rather than the geography of the content of the article. So just something to keep in mind there. All right, I'm sure you're all pretty comfortable with filters, pretty standard refinements there. So what I want to talk about is another way of refining your search using our field search options. So using field searching helps you target your results more effectively by telling the database exactly where you want to look for your terms. So instead of it searching the full text or all fields, which can bring in some irrelevant material, if we focus on specific fields such as the title or the abstract, that can help ensure that the articles that are turning up in your results are actually about your topic. So if we quickly adjust my 3 concept search here and use the selector field drop down to search in the abstract. Okay, it's now only searching for my keywords in the abstracts of all my results. And so that significantly reduced my items there. At this stage, we're going to take a step back and look at how we've actually structured the search. So this is often an approach we'll teach to your undergraduate students because this is a nice way of running one search. We're separating out our concepts. If we're getting too many results, we'll just look or recommend they look in the abstract field. But when searching systematically, so particularly if you're looking at doing a scoping review or a systematic review, a helpful approach is to run a separate search for each concept and then combine them using the search history. This gives you more flexibility in your search, gives you separate building blocks that you can pull together, and it also makes it easier to adjust your search if needed. So how I can sort of cast a slightly broader net than what we have here is to look for my keywords for each concept in both the abstract and the title. That should just expand things a little further and increase the likelihood of finding relevant studies. So what I'm going to do is create a separate search for each concept, searching in both the title and the abstract fields, and then I will combine those 3 separate searches using search history. So I'm just going to adjust things a little here. I'm going to change this and to an or, and I'm repeating those same keywords in both. And then this second field, I'm going to search in the title. So I'm looking for all of those active learning synonyms in the abstract field, while also searching for them in the title field. These separate concept searches are going to give us lots of results because they're single concepts. We've just got a whole heap of terms here. So let me quickly do some more copy paste to get my 2 other concepts in. So I'll swap this out for my concept of student engagement. And now finally, large classes. Okay, so each of those separate concepts have now been run. So now I'm going to expand the search history. So if I toggle this on, we can see all the searches that I've run this morning. So the original 3 concept search, adjusting that to search in the abstract, and then my separate concept searches here. I'm just going to clear the search box and now take those 3 separate concept searches, select them, and use the option to search with and this is going to give me the overlapping results of those initial concepts. So here we go. This time I'm getting 40 results. So it's sort of your nice Goldilocks between doing that one concept search without any fields applied. It's more than just searching the abstract, but less than searching all fields. So we can see that lovely history there. And here is my hopefully very focused, very relevant set of results. All right. I got ahead of my notes, so I just got to see if there's some spiel I need to get you. I got excited doing that search. All right. So the other benefit of using search history is, as you can see over here, we have this option to edit our searches as well. This is super helpful if you notice a typo or if you've discovered that some of your terms are redundant and you've just got to tidy up your strategy. So then we can easily edit this and rerun our searches without having to build that whole process again. So super helpful using the search history. If it's not something you're familiar with using, I would really recommend you go and explore that. And if you need a hand, you contact your faculty librarian. Yeah, best part of using databases, I think. All right. Now, the other benefit of using the search history is, as we can see here, we have functionality that allows us to save our searches. So if I wanted to save all of these items so I can see that full sort of progression of my search, or if I just wanted to save that final one, I can select it and use the Save Searches button or link. You do need to have an account within the database platform to make use of this functionality. So we can see that I'm signed in at the moment. If you're not signed in, there'll be a sign in option. If you don't have an account, you just follow through the sign up prompts, and then we can go and save our searches. And essentially we click on the link and it's just a little form to fill out, so you can set a name for your search and how long you want to keep it around for. All right, very quickly before I pass back over, and I'll do a little bit more searching and saving stuff later, I just wanted to mention that another way to focus your results, I guess, is to search with subject headings. So earlier we looked at how our keywords were appearing within the subject terms, which is a good indicator you're on the right track. If you want to search with those terms themselves or use the controlled vocabulary for the database, which is a tag or a label each database applies to the items to describe and identify the main topics, you can make use of the thesaurus. So searching in the thesaurus for your sort of primary topic will suggest, what's that going to look for? Learner engagement. Oh no, student engagement. So if I search with my concept, and I chose the wrong selection, I'll switch it to relevancy ranked. This is going to let you know what the database controlled vocabulary is. So with this one, I can see for student engagement, they use the term learner engagement. And if I keep following that through, it will show me the scope note for what this term covers and suggest related terms as well. And anything with a tick box, you can add to your search, and you would be able to start building that into new searches or into your search history. I'll pause there and leave everything else for part 2 when I come back on the other side of the presenters. I know that was a pretty quick run through, so if we've got time, we can do questions now, or absolutely questions
we do,
at the end.
Lauren. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you. It's very nice to see someone be so excited about searching the literature, and I think this is why we have colleagues like yourself who can support us in this space, because you It was a small demonstration, but I was sort of going, oh, like there's so many new things for myself that I learned in this process. So we do have time for questions. We're going to take 5 minutes. I've changed the order up a little bit. So let's take some questions, colleagues. If you have any questions for Lauren about what you've seen her talk about today, I can start with a question while you gather your thoughts, perhaps. But Lauren, I wanted to ask you, so, if I'm a beginning researcher in this space and I'm just dipping my toe into this area called SoTL, like, what is your advice for how I identify like the different terms that people can use in different disciplines to describe the same concept? Like, how do I start building? So I might be saying active learning, right? But it might be known as something else. It might be known as flipped classrooms in another discipline. So how do I start to build a sense of the different terms being used across those different disciplines?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a number of ways. Often we do recommend with just start searching for the term and have a look, see what subject headings are being applied, see how other researchers discuss that concept in their abstracts. Usually that will kick off a few ideas. Sometimes it's actually doing some Google searching rather to see if there are blogs or other professional sites or things that more loosely will recommend terms. And then each time you add a new term, so you find a new term, redo that Primo search or that ERIC search, and then again look through those the subject headings and the abstracts to see if that new term has found another one for you. And that's all part of that iterative process where it's not strictly linear. We don't have all those terms to begin with. We discover them along the way.
Yeah.
Or use your networks, talk to your colleague, come to a community of practice and say, oh, I'm talking about active learning here, and someone will call it flipped classrooms over there. So learn from each other. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think I love the point you're making about the iterative nature of research. I mean, the iterative nature of searching and constructing a search strategy. But I think I'm also really thinking about that research is iterative. So rather than thinking about research needing to be this very linear one-way process and you can't go back because that would be cheating. No, it's not. Actually, as a researcher, you have to go back and you have to fine-tune the aspects of your research that will lead you to the outcomes that you need. So I'm thankful that you've made that point, because I think as researchers within our disciplines or even within SoTL, I think that's part of understanding that it is messy, it's iterative, and you have to go forward and backwards to really construct the search or the research outcome that you want. Any further questions or reflections from anyone in the group? No? We're happy to. Oh, yeah, please.
Thank you, Kashila, for organizing this. Thank you, Lauren, for presenting. Lauren used to be in our office, and I often, every year, I invite Lauren and other library ladies to come to my classroom for first year bachelor students to teach about this one. My question, I don't know whether this is maybe for Kashila or Lauren, is I think in probably when we do for example, for researchers like ourselves, I think for searching the literature, it's probably we okay with that. I'm thinking whether from either of you can give some insight into the synthesis of the information that we found. What I mean by that, for example, how do we use them? I think some of the articles, they will say, oh, this current literature says blah blah blah, and then have quotation of the author and the year citations. And then I think some people, they talk about how this literature inform their research and action. In our discussion or in our writing, which will be the best way to synthesize information to inform our research? Yeah,
Great question, Meow, and probably one that, Lauren, you might pick up on part two, but I'm happy for, do you want to have a go at that one, and then I can come in with my perspective as well?
Oh, look, I probably don't have heaps on the synthesizing stage, but I guess for me, it looks back at your purpose. Like, what is it that you're aiming to achieve from doing your literature searching? So how big a scale is your process? I guess part of before you get to the synthesizing stage is about refining and looking at just what is, just had my lights go out, sorry, what is most relevant. So looking at filtering and making your search really precise. So you're only looking at what's most relevant. So you're reviewing the smallest set you need. And part of the evaluating that I'll touch on later can further help you refine what's there. But in terms of actually doing all that reading and how you pull those concepts together and what impact that is or change that's going to have on your teaching, maybe Kashila has advice on how you do that side of the piece.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. So Meow, I would say to you so when you're engaging with the literature and you're thinking about, let's imagine you have 15 papers that you've looked at around a certain concept. One of the things that you should be doing is to identify the themes that come from those papers. So I have seen people who present their work and talk about, Bismarck said this, Lauren said that, Karen said this, and Meow said that. That's not a literature synthesis. That's just you listing different papers and what's been found. What we mean by synthesis is where you go, what are the common themes that in these 15 papers, what are the 3 or 4 common themes that I'm seeing? So it might be that Bismarck, Lauren, Kim and Karen have found this common theme around active learning, really putting students in the driving seat of their learning. Fantastic. So 4 researchers in that pool have identified this common theme, whereas Koshila and Lachlan in their work might have identified that active learning actually puts the educators in a bit of an uncomfortable zone because, they've got to kind of let go of traditional ways of doing things. So you go, wonderful, that's my second theme. It's not about how many people have said it. So there is an element of you as the synthesizer of the literature and the researcher to really say to yourself, what constitutes a theme, and how many themes can I see in the papers that I have looked at. And so there is a bit of an art and science. It's not that, 5 people need to say something for it to be a theme. So you need to really sit with your literature and understand, the common ideas or concepts that are coming out. And then I would also say the next point would be very much around who are you? Who is your audience? So who is that journal or who is that conference that you are presenting this work to? And really think about how the work in that journal is being presented. So I would say then it's about understanding, for example, the how others write for that journal, for example, and becoming really familiar with the audience that you're presenting this work to. Look, we don't have too much time to cover that today, but I have taken on board your point about how do we bring this together. And one of the sessions we will have later in the year is about writing up your work, and we will come back to that to say, how do we bring all these amazing ideas together and present it in a way that is synthesized, but also kind of advances the conversation. So I hope, that was helpful, and we'll move on now, but we will keep cycling back to this to say not just that we're doing the work, but who are we communicating it to and how do we communicate it so that the audience, the reader, engages with what you've done, but also what you found. All right, so at this point, I'm just running a little bit behind time, so I'm going to move straight into our guest speakers. So Kim is a lecturer in occupational therapy. She's in the School of Allied Health, Exercise and Food Science. She is going to talk about a scoping review I think you are engaged with currently with your team around preparing occupational therapy students for practice in rural areas. Over to you, Kim. You are on, we can see your slides.
I'm just trying to get the right view. So I'll just quickly stop that. I'm so used to sharing on Zoom, but not on Teams. So
we can definitely see the right view, Kim. We don't see any of your notes or anything, so
okay.
it's correct for us.
Okay, good. That's good. Thank you. Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. My name's Kim. I'm employed in a teaching-focused position with the occupational therapy team at School of Allied Health, Exercise and Sports Sciences. Currently, occupational therapy is taught on the Albury and Port Macquarie campuses with Charles Sturt. In this brief presentation, I'm going to be discussing my experiences of engaging with the SoTL literature as part of completing a scoping review. This scoping review was completed by the Portal Review Group, and you can see the team members listed up on the slide, which is an initiative led by occupational therapy staff based in Port Macquarie and in Albury. It includes members with research allocations, as well as teaching-focused staff using their scholarly allocation to produce scholarly outputs, and this is the case for me. And this is actually the first scoping review that I've been involved in too, and it's been a really interesting process. And one of my team members and mentors, Karen, is actually present in this room today. So we're going to look at the what, why, and how of the scoping review. So the topic area that we focused on was across the globe, what strategies are used by occupational therapies, across the globe, what strategies are used by different educational institutions to prepare occupational therapy students for practice in rural locations. This topic is I'll just go on to my next slide, sorry. This topic is of interest because we know that in Australia and globally, despite greater needs in rural areas, occupational therapists are more heavily distributed to urban spaces, which really limits service access and health outcomes for rural people and communities. The preparation of students for rural practice may actually improve rural workforce retention and recruitment, but the range and scope of those preparation strategies employed by education providers are unclear. We were interested in understanding and describing the range of strategies education services across the globe use to prepare occupational therapy students for rural practice. And on a more local level, a lot of our students at Charles Sturt actually come from surrounding regional and rural areas and go on to practice in these areas after graduation. So that's why it was really interesting for us. So we used JBR evidence synthesis methodology following the PRISMA SCR, which is the PRISMA extension for scoping reviews approach. You can see the PRISMA diagram up there, which explains what we did and the steps that we followed. The study included any and all global publications about strategies used to prepare occupational therapy students for future rural practice prior to enrollment, during their studies, or upon graduation. We looked at a number of databases and these were systematically searched for publications. The citations were screened by 2 or more independent researchers against inclusion criteria, and data extracted from included publications using a customized extraction tool. Our scoping review protocol was published in the BMJ Open. You can see the QR code up there if you're interested. So what have we found? There's a lot that we found, but I'm just going to highlight a few key points just in the interest of time. So you can see here the number of studies over, so here you can see the number of studies over time. You can see that strategies for preparing students for rural practice have had an increasing focus in the research over time, with a peak around 2010 to 2020. We also looked at where the studies were published. You can see that the majority of studies are from Australia. And if we flick back to the previous slide, this timeline really aligns with the rollout of University Departments of Rural Health, or UDRHs, which started around the mid-90s to the early 2000s, where 9 UDRHs were started across Australia. And currently in 2025, we have 19 UDRHs. And of interest is one focus of UDRHs is on preparing students for rural practice. So this really makes sense. We also looked at the different strategy aims of each article. The majority focused on preparing students for rural context, which was followed by a focus on encouraging students to work in rural places after graduation. We also looked at the articles by strategy type, and we aligned these strategies with the strategies discussed in the World Health Organization guideline on health workforce development, attraction, recruitment, and retention in rural and remote areas. As you can see, the most common strategy is rural exposure, typically through placements. And then moving down, some of the studies also had students in rural education locations, but not like rural clinical schools. If you look a little bit down, support networks, there was increasing supports for students while on placement, usually from Australian UDRHs. And then if you look at the fourth one down, there was also a bit of mainstream rural content in the curricula that the students were learning. Okay. Most of the strategies were implemented once the students were already undergoing their studies, so during their enrollment. And the studies generally reported on short-term outcomes. For example, whether the strategy was actually implemented, the student reaction, so things like student satisfaction with the strategy, student learning, so their knowledge and skills gained. But this was not assessed in the long term. It wasn't assessed whether that was sustained over time. So from this, we have gathered that there needs to be more focus on targeting rural students for enrollment, which was also one of the World Health Organization strategies, providing training in rural places for rural students, including more mainstream rural content in curricula, and also evaluating the effectiveness of strategies on workforce outcomes. So looking at long-term outcomes, not just those short-term outcomes. Maybe this is happening, but it didn't come across in the journal articles that we saw. And also, maybe it's not been written about in the journal articles. It's not been researched or published. So from here, we plan to do a qualitative thematic analysis of the articles in the review. We also hope to look at a review of rural content in occupational therapy courses in Australia. So what are other universities doing in terms of that mainstream rural content? And a further publication is anticipated as well. So just a few reflections on this process. To me, it's been really helpful working on the scoping review as a team. I'm very grateful to my team, including Karen, who's here, who have patiently mentored me in the process of conducting a scoping review. Sharing ideas and insights and putting different brains together in the same space has been so valuable. I've also learned the importance of engaging with the SoTL literature as a teaching-focused staff member. Specifically with the study, it has helped me to think more critically about curriculum development. How are we as Charles Sturt educators preparing our occupational therapy students for rural practice? And how can we evaluate the short-term and long-term outcomes of this? It's also been really helpful learning the skills for completing a scoping review, which can hopefully be implemented again in the future. So I've learned some really great skills. So that's my presentation. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best in engaging with the SoTL literature in your daily teaching practices.
Well done. Thank you so much, Kim. That was really inspirational to hear, and to hear that, as your first kind of foray into this, and you've done this, you're thinking about what's next. Really great, and I hope colleagues in this audience feel inspired as well to continue with their work or to start their work in this space. So thank you so much. We will have some time for questions at the end, but Kim, if you're happy to share your slides, please share them in the chat at the moment, and
yes,
people can look at that.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to move now straight into the next presentation. Bismarck is a lecturer in diagnostic radiography in the School of Dentistry and Medical Science, and I believe, Bismarck, that you are going to talk about your experience of engaging with the SoTL literature on integrating soft skills into healthcare education. Over to you, Bismarck. We can see your slides, Bismarck, but you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, so everyone, my name is Bismarck, and I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. Today I'll be sharing my experience with engaging with the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning Literature, specifically around soft skills in healthcare education. Okay, so let me begin with a story from a friend who also happens to be a medical radiologist.
Bismarck, sorry to interrupt you, but your sound is fading in and out a little bit, so we're having difficulties hearing you.
Mm-hmm.
We can hear you, but maybe you need.
Let me turn the microphone is.
Yeah, I think there's something going on with the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's really good.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, but he can't hear us.
Yeah, that's much better. We can hear you.
Hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry for the hitches. Okay. So I want to begin my presentation with a story from a friend who also happens to be a medical radiation science academic and then also a professional radiographer. So he went for a CT scan, and according to him, that was his first CT scan. As a trained professional, he understood the process, but the experience still left him very uneasy. Now, according to him, the process was quite efficient, but it lacked empathy. Now, based on what he said, it reminded me that even with all the technical skills, how we do treat patients can also make a huge difference. And so from the experience that he shared, it highlights a critical gap in the sense that technical knowledge is not enough. The patient also need to feel safe, they also need to feel heard, and then they also need to be respected. So that informed our decision, into conducting a scoping review into the role of soft skills in medical radiation science. So what are soft skills? Soft skills are the non-technical interpersonal skills that influence how professionals interact with patients, colleagues, and members of the multidisciplinary team. They do play a major role in improving patient trust, ensuring collaboration, and then also reducing errors in the clinical setting. Unlike the technical skills in medical radiation sciences, which tend to focus on the mastery of specific tasks or equipment, soft skills complement clinical skills and then also addresses the human and relational aspect of healthcare delivery. Now, despite the importance of soft skills, there's still a gap in understanding how soft skills are taught, applied, and valued within the medical radiation science education and practice. So as a team, together with my colleagues in the medical radiation science discipline, we sought to conduct a scoping review to examine how soft skills are taught and valued in the literature. We reviewed published articles over the last decade using key databases such as Scopus, PubMed, MCare, CINAHL, and then also the Web of Science. Our main goal was to map existing evidence on how these skills are integrated into medical radiation science practice and education, and why they even do matter. So after going through all the databases, our initial search, we reviewed 6,231 articles, and then out of that, only 25 studies, were included in the final analysis. Of the 25 articles, the highest were from Australia, and that one, it was 6 in all. And then also out of the 25, we also realized that only one primarily focused on student. And even with that, the sample size was 8, which suggests that much has not been done in the areas of education when it comes to soft skills. And then with that, you can tell that it is very unknown if the various training curricula embed soft skills, and if they do, what are their measured impact on student outcome. And so this is the Prisma flowchart, looking at the various databases and the article that we found, and then the final analysis that also involved 25 articles. Our key findings. The review found consistent evidence that soft skills, particularly communication and empathy, lead to better patient outcomes, lower error rates, and then also stronger team dynamics. One striking insight was that students and practitioners who were trained in communication skills reported higher confidence and more patient or more efficient patient interactions. In terms of empathy, we also found that patients feel part of the healthcare treatment process when practitioners are empathetic towards them. We found out that it helped build patient trust and then also satisfaction amongst the patient. In terms of the teaching strategies, diverse teaching strategies were used, but key amongst them were workshop, video demonstration, and then also simulation activities. Now, based on the evidence that we found, how has that informed my own teaching practice? I have now become more conscious of integrating soft skills through simulation activities that stimulate real-life patient interactions. In our medical radiation science lab, for instance, the students are introduced to role-playing exercises where some of them do act as practitioners and then others do as patients, all in an attempt to foster an understanding of patient perspective. Now, after the role-playing, what we then do is that the students are given the opportunity to provide feedback or also critique themselves. There are also reflective activities that we allow the student to engage in, where they analyze their interactions among themselves as well as patients anytime they find themselves in the clinical setting, all in an attempt to identify areas that need improvement. Also, through the creation of joint learning activities with students from other healthcare disciplines to stimulate teamwork in the normal healthcare environment. And so, for example, in one of the subjects that I do teach, MRS 215, because the MRS 215 relate to only medical radiation science students, but when it comes to medical radiation science student, we do have other sub-disciplines like the diagnostic radiography, the nuclear medicine, and then also the radiation therapy. Now, what I do is that previously there was a particular assessment that was a group task, but then the students were assigned based on the campuses they were, and then also based on the particular subspecialty that they were in. And what it means is that you end up having only students from diagnostic radiography in that particular assessment group, or nuclear medicine or radiation therapy. So following this scoping review and the evidence that came to bear, what I did for this particular academic year was to allocate the students in the groups through random allocation, such that every group will have a mix of these specialties, and all of them are, quite intentional to ensure that the students learn how to develop that group collaboration, also develop problem-solving skills, or how to deal with conflict amongst themselves. And that, as I earlier mentioned, was quite intentional, all in an attempt to stimulate soft skills amongst themselves. Also, with our first year subject, some of the first year subject involves students from other healthcare disciplines. I think that for the BMS program, I think anatomy or physiology, what we can also do is that some of the assessment should be group tasks, and then you need to randomly allocate them. So, for example, you can have students from the medical radiation science discipline being paired with students from the nursing or physiotherapy discipline, all in an attempt to mimic what happens in a real life healthcare environment. Now, reflecting on the whole exercise, I have learned that soft skills are too important to leave a chance. And here are my top tips. 1, you need to embed soft skills early, make them part of the curriculum from the start. Also use real scenarios that spark emotional and critical thinking among the student. There's also the need to collaborate across disciplines because shared perspectives tend to bring richer learning. From all these experiences and then the findings that we had, it has also informed us in moving forward in developing and validating a soft skills assessment tool to assess the competencies of our medical radiation science students. We are also looking at developing a framework for educators on how to embed soft skills into the medical radiation science curriculum. You can find the published article online, and the link is also available. I will share the presentation in the chat, and then if you're interested in the article, you can just go online to download it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bismarck. Thank you for sharing. I love the way that you started with a story. That was wonderful. And you've spoken a lot about not just the work that you've done, but how that's now impacting on how you organize curriculum, how you design the opportunities for students to learn. So I think that's really useful for us to reflect on how something like a scoping review or a systematic review, how powerful it can be in driving our thinking about how we do teaching, you know, how we create spaces for learning. So thank you both for that. I've been keeping an eye on the participants, and I don't think our next speaker is here. Kate, I don't think Kate is in the room. Are you here, Kate?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There you are. Sorry.
That's okay.
I've not seen you. Thank you. Here you are, Kate. So I'm going to hand straight over to you. Just a short introduction, Kate. You're a senior lecturer in the School of Education and the course director of HDR Pathways, and you're reflecting on your scoping review that you conducted on honours pedagogies, and I believe you presented at CSEDX as well last year on this. So over to you.
Apologies, everyone. I don't have slides. I thought I'd just talk to some of the prompts that we were given. So as Kashila said, I'm course director of the HDR Pathways in the School of Education. And what that means is I'm responsible for the university-wide graduate certificate in research that was launched this year, and also responsible for our faculty honours course. And I started this role in, I think it was midway through 2023. So my scoping review was part of, I guess, a professional interest in learning more about the course that I was in charge of. I had my own honours experience as a guide, but I knew that the CSU honours experience was different from my own at a different university, and I wanted to get an understanding of how I could make changes to the course that would be effective and actually support students rather than just making assumptions based off of my own experience. And so it was part of a Teaching Academy grant in 2023. So thank you to the Teaching Academy for giving me money to do that, because it was really useful in supporting the development of the research. It was also important just generally because if you look at the statistics of honours students' completions nationally, it has fallen from 84% to 72%, which is actually quite a high number. But given that honours students are high achievers who usually require a high GPA to get in, who have had successful undergraduate degrees prior to enrolment in an honours degree, we would expect it to be much higher, I think. And the drop from 84% to 72% nationally is a little concerning. So I wanted to have a look not only for my own professional interest, but in terms of contributing to the broader discussion at a national level about what we could do to improve this. So what I did was I did a scoping review of honours student pedagogies, and I looked at 20 years worth of papers, and I chose the 20 years because it was kind of fortunate that the honours degrees, most of them there'd been changes in the university structures, and so 20 years seemed appropriate, but also technologically there was a lot of change in research and what research looked like over that 20 years in terms of, rather than going to the library and getting the journal, there was increased access to online databases and things like that. So particularly for students at CSU who are often online, that online context of what honours looks like for online students would have been relevant. And so it was 20 years of papers. And I did choose to initially only focus on student experience. So any papers that talked about student experience. There are some about supervisors and their reflections, things like that. But I was really focused on what helps students in an honours course. And I'll come back to that when I talk about the reflections. And what we did is we gathered them. We initially had, oh, I wrote it down, but I can't see it on my notes there. I think we had 145 papers from our searches, and then we only included 10 because there weren't that many in that time period that actually focused on student experience or had some form of student voice, which was a little surprising to me actually once we filtered that out. Once we had our 10 papers, we used a thematic analysis to analyze whether people were talking about tips for preparation. Particularly, we were interested in looking at the interventions and supports for students. And we also looked at the demographics of the papers. So how many students were involved? Was it longitudinal, which is kind of hard given that it's a one-year course. But did they go over multiple years, or did they look at larger cohorts? And what discipline were they in? And from that thematic analysis, we sort of developed a model of supervision support that supervisors could draw on to understand their own practice of supervision and how they could support students within that practice. So what did we find? Well, we found actually that our honours course is designed quite in line with what the literature says about supporting students. The literature says that you should have a research methods subject that gives specific instruction. It says that they need time with their supervisors. And so our actual design of the course was very in line with what is recommended in the research literature. But the research literature also notes that students are highly unprepared for the experience of an honours year because it is quite different to an undergraduate. It requires cycles of revision, of work, a very close contact with one academic. And we really sort of, for my own personal practice, I honed in on that as a takeaway for my scholarship of teaching and learning in, well, what can I do to improve this then? Because there were discussions about creating more cohort cohesion, because although the supervisor is an important part of it, the social support of other students is important, and our honours course is online. And so how do you create cohesion and social support in an online cohort? The literature didn't have too many answers about that because there aren't that many online honours cohorts. But we looked at like, how do we prepare them? We did also find that there are a broad range of disciplines represented in the studies, but there are not many, how do I say this so it makes sense? There aren't many multiple studies in one discipline. So education might have one study, history might have one study, engineering might have one study, but there's no broad look at one discipline in terms of honours cohorts. In terms of key reflections about the process and my tips for success, I think that our problem with our review particularly is that right from the start I wanted to look at students only. And as I said, we only had 145 studies, and that is representative of the fact that Australia, there are only, I think, 3 or 4 other countries that have the same honours model as us. So right from the start, there isn't that many people who are doing the same type of honours degree. But I did start too narrow with having a real student focus, which meant that we only had 10 included studies. And I do regret that my search strategy kind of limited straight away to trying to find student focused papers, because I do wonder if there was some papers that were in the supervision area that were academic reflections or more theoretical pieces that probably could have informed what we had done. But that was a decision that I made in the beginning, and I decided to sort of continue down that pathway because I'd already done it. And if I was to take that back, we would have had to go through the process because we followed a abstract and title screening and then a full paper screening process. And realistically, my RA had already finished her hours and we didn't have enough time. So I went with what we had, and the papers that we did have did provide some insights. But my advice is try and not be too narrow. Like I guess it's that secret sauce where it's like you can't be too narrow, but you can't be too broad. We definitely went too narrow. My second piece of advice is meet with the librarian. I met with Claudio, our faculty librarian, and honestly, as you can probably appreciate from the first half of this meeting, I came in right at the end. Sorry, I had another meeting, but there are so many tips and tricks to databases. And I actually think it's quite database specific sometimes, the search strategies that you need. And Claudio really gave me insight into how I could really refine my strategy to get the best out of each database. So meet with your librarian. And also with a scoping review, I think that you need to have a collaborator. As I mentioned, I had an RA that was funded through the Teaching Academy grant, and she was really helpful in bouncing ideas off, and also just you need more than one person to do the screening. And so you really need to find a collaborator who is interested in the area and who you can have those fruitful discussions with and bounce ideas off, because that really helped get this publication going as well. And if you are interested, it has been submitted for to a journal, but it's under review. But I'm happy if you're interested in honours pedagogies to send you the draft that we submitted. I did that for a colleague in psychology after I presented it at CSU edX. So I'm happy to share what I found. But my main advice is don't go too narrow in the beginning. Meet with the librarian and definitely have collaborators that you can work with. So yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Kate, for that very authentic and really heartfelt, I guess, reflection on, kind of not just the successes, but kind of the challenges and opportunities along the way. We've been talking increasingly about the iterative nature of research and needing to go back, and fix things up and move forward. So I appreciate the way that you've shared, kind of how you navigated the space. I agree, make friends with a librarian. That's one tip that we all have to take away from our conversation today. I have put in the chat a question for yourself, Kate, Kim, and Bismarck, because there was a question about, how on earth did you kind of synthesize what you found? Like, what does that look like for you? What does a good synthesis look like? So if you have an opportunity while Lauren is presenting her next part, to please respond to that question, because I think we're all interested in the various ways in which we can now, we've talked about a lot about the doing of the scoping review. This is more about the writing up of it. Meow, I will go to Lauren first if I can, because I'm just very aware of time. And if we have time at the end, I'd love to come back to your question, but also please feel free to put it in the chat so that we can reflect on that while Lauren's speaking. So Lauren, over to you, and then hopefully we'll also have about 5 minutes for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be quick in this last bit. It was so really cool to hear about those 3 different projects. Exciting stuff happening. So earlier we talked about the steps of searching. Now I'm very quickly going to discuss how you can keep track of what you've done by exporting results and documenting your search, which is a key aspect if you are completing a scoping review. And then we're also going to explore very briefly some ways to keep up to date with the literature. And then I'll talk through some considerations when evaluating your SoTL literature, which will connect well with Kashila's opening. I think we'll see some parallel themes there. So of course, once you have refined your search and you've found all the results that you need, it's important that you save those results in a way that's useful for you. So most databases will allow you to export your citations directly into a reference management tool like EndNote or Mendeley or something. Or if you're using a sort of screening tool to manage your review like Confidence, JBI, there's a whole host out there. So most platforms will allow you to download a CSV or an RAS file so that you can organize those or import them into the relevant tool. It will look different on each platform. EBSCO makes it nice and easy because we just come up to the share option on our results and we follow the form through to email those exported results. So the big thing that I inevitably forget to do is changing the format. So I often have to send it to myself twice. So don't be like me. Make sure you check that form first. Alongside saving your results, it's also important to document your search strategy, especially if you're conducting a literature review or a systematic search where you need to document that as part of your methodology. So keeping a record of the databases you searched, the exact search strings you used, and any filters you applied will help you to stay organized and have all that information ready for when you're doing your write-up. And it also means that your search is, all that information's there if you need to replicate or refine the search later. So again, you can make use of saving your searches from the search history. Of course, you could also just copy your search history details and keep a record in a Word document or a spreadsheet. We have some templates and suggested ways of documenting your search in our systematic and systematic-like review guides. In terms of keeping up to date, as we've discussed, this very iterative process, what we're talking about, and searching is not a one-time task. And of course, new research is constantly being published. So a few quick suggestions on how you can keep up to date without having to rebuild your search all the way through. So with that saving your search, you can also create search alerts. So again, if we select the Save Searches option, you'll see that part of the form enables you to set up an alert so you can be notified on your preference when new items would appear in that search history. Again, each of the database platforms are a little different in how you set up an alert, but we have instructions available in our guides, or again, that's something you just email your faculty librarian and we can get that detail to you. Another useful strategy is to make use of citation tracking or snowballing, so looking at both who has cited key papers and what references those papers include. So you can use tools like Scopus, Web of Science, Google Scholar, Research Rabbit to uncover newer and related studies that maybe didn't appear in your initial search. No time for demos on that today, but we have lots of advice in our guides or in other of our research PD sessions to explore those. All right, but let's talk about evaluating your literature. So SoTL literature, as you're likely all aware, can take many forms. So it will include empirical studies, reflective practice articles, theoretical discussions, and maybe also just some opinion pieces. So because of this variety, it is important to assess how relevant and reliable each source is for your purpose. So you're likely familiar with the CRAP test because it's what we encourage your students to use as a general framework for evaluating sources. And of course, those principles still apply within SoTL research. But there's also some unique characteristics with SoTL that require some additional considerations. So of course, a useful way to evaluate the literature is to make use of the principles designed to guide how to complete or conduct strong SoTL research. So when I was searching and doing my preparation for this session, I could not escape Felton's 5 principles. So that's what we're just going to talk through here, and they'll be very similar to the items Kashila mentioned up front. So the 5 principles, the first we've got is an inquiry into student learning. So good SoTL research is focused on understanding and improving how students learn rather than just describing a teaching practice. So when evaluating, you just need to ask yourself, is the study generating insights about learning, or is it purely a descriptive or opinion piece? With our second principle around being grounded in context, we're looking to see that SoTL research, it should be relevant to a particular teaching and learning environment. So you want to consider, does the study acknowledge the specific context in which the teaching is happening? But are the findings also useful beyond that setting? And additionally, and very importantly, strong SoTL research should be engaging with existing theory and literature. A good study doesn't exist in isolation. As we've discussed, it's all part of that ongoing conversation. Good SoTL literature should be building on what's already known. So if a paper lacks references to prior research or isn't connecting to broader discussions, it's a red flag. Third, we want it to be methodologically sound. So SoTL research should use an appropriate and transparent method. So you want to check what research method they've used. Are they clearly explaining how they're going about it? Does the method match the question that they're addressing? And you also want to think, are there any gaps or limitations, and have those been acknowledged by the authors? Fourth, SoTL research should be conducted in partnership with students. So not always possible, but where it is, we want to see that SoTL work is valuing student perspectives. So you want to be asking, are student voices included? Is their experience meaningfully considered? And also, was it proper ethics process followed there as well for including student voices and student participation? And finally, appropriately public. So for SoTL research to have impact, it should be contributing to that wider conversation. So check if it's being shared in an appropriate way, regardless of the format or the resource type. Is it accessible and available for use and critique? So hopefully those principles just give you some additional questions or ways of engaging with the literature you find to make sure it's worthwhile for you. I have a whole list of references and further reading, which will be available in the slides, and a whole bunch of useful links. And I just, building off those three presentations, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. So if you've been inspired to go and conduct your own scoping review or your own research project, I'd encourage you to take a look at our systematic and systematic-like review guide. We did in my demonstrations today, we covered a lot of the nitty-gritty of doing the systematic searches, but of course that's part of a much larger project. So if you want further guidance, jump into that. We also have a live research PD session, which you're all welcome to register for, coming up late in May on developing your systematic-like or systematic-like literature review, or you can watch a recorded version of that anytime. And again, contact your faculty librarian. We are happy to help you with whatever stage we can, whether it's selecting the right databases, getting your search working correctly, exporting results, using Confidence. We're here to help you out, so don't hesitate. That's everything from me. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lauren. And once again, I want to express my thanks to yourself, Lauren, Kim, Bismarck, and Kate for coming along and partnering with the Teaching Academy to support conversations in this space. It's so important to build capacity, I guess, collectively as an academic community around the scholarship of teaching and learning. We're all learning in this space, right? And every time I hear you speak, Lauren and others, when you talk about how you've kind of taken SoTL and applied it in your disciplines, there's so much learning to come from. So thank you for partnering with the Teaching Academy and contributing to this conversation. I'm glad to see that you've shared your slides because other people can then engage with that and use that to inform their planning and their thinking. I've just had a whole page full of notes that I've been making as well. So there's a lot to take away from this. And we do have about 5 minutes that we can have for questions. So are there any final questions, either for the panel, for Lauren, just general reflections? Now, Meow, you did have your hand up before, so I'm going to go to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kashila. Thank you, everyone, for presenting. Can I raise a quick question for either Kim or Kate or Bismarck? In terms of your scoping review, from the time when you find your team having this idea of doing this scoping review, by the time you submit the draft, what's the time frame? Is it a year or two? What's the time frame?
It's been probably, Karen, about a year. Is that right? Yeah, it's been a lengthy process.
I also took longer than I anticipated. I think we started in September or October of 2023, and I had hoped to have it submitted in 2024, but I submitted it in January of this year. So yeah, just over a year, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that we started ours in December 2023, and we got it submitted somewhere in I think September September 2024. Yeah. So it was quite, a longer period. But the most important thing is that if you have maybe a sizable number of people on board, then you can evenly distribute the task. Scoping review, I think it's not sort of task that one person or two people can, do. So you would have to get quite some few people on board, then you can evenly distribute the task amongst yourself. If not, it's going to take a very long period of time. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. I guess good things take time, and in that process, I guess in a year you are also setting foundations for the next part of your work, right? A scoping review often is really critical but important first part of any research, right? Understanding what's going on, what's the conversation, so that you can then start to do your own empirical work. So I think when we talked about this last time we met, we talked about the idea that often we start with very exploratory pieces of work, like a literature review, a scoping review, or a narrative review, to understand what's happening in our discipline, what's happening in the broader higher education space, and then use that, now that you're informed, now that you know all these things about that concept you were exploring, you can really construct a very strong empirical study to move into the next stage of research. So, and Kate, just like that, you reflected that there's a gap. There's often a gap in the research as well. So part of this is understanding what is not being said, and therefore how can I contribute to the conversation. Thank you very much. Any further thoughts and reflections from anyone who's left on the call? I did note that we didn't talk about this explicitly today, but I think all three presenters in the panel talked about the idea of having a question that guides your efforts in engaging with the literature. And so I think if we look through your presentations again, we will all be able to identify or get a sense of the question that guided that. So and obviously we understand that question gets fine-tuned and refined the further you go into that space and the more you understand about the concept that you're reviewing. But I think one of the points I've taken away from today is that reflection on create a really strong but also open-ended question in a way to guide your focus. Otherwise, it keeps you kind of focused on the things that you're wanting to evidence through your work. So that was a reflection that I took away from this. We do have, and I'm putting this into the chat, we do have a session coming up on the 17th of June. We haven't opened up registrations for this yet, but it's the continuation of this conversation. So on the 17th of June, we're going to talk more about the design of a research project. So, obviously we started with thinking about what is SoTL research. We've talked about the literature. Now we're talking about, well, if I'm going to design a research project in this space, what might I do and how might that look like? So I look forward to re-engaging with some of you in that space, but of course to continue this conversation as an academic community. But on that note, everyone, I think it's been a wonderful session. Thank you to everybody who's participated, presented, asked questions and reflected as part of this session. It's wonderful to see our academics presenting their work, the best part of the show, I say. And I look forward to re-engaging with everyone in different contexts through the Teaching Academy. So have a great day, and I'll see you all another time. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, folks. Catch us later.
Thank you, Lauren.
Glad it was on target.
You'll get those emails now. So
yeah, that's right. We'll be busy.
Yes.
All right.
It's been
Catch us
wonderful.
later.
Thank you, Bing. Yeah.
No worries.
Bye.
Bye.
I might be on hold.